Hello and welcome, it's The Folk Show. My guest this week is Yusuf, or Cat Stevens, originally and still. His new album, brilliant and varied piece of work, is called King of a Land, and later this month he plays Glastonbury for the very first time, amazingly, in the Sunday afternoon Legends slot. So he talked about that, his path to the Pyramid stage, about his new album, and how some of it links back to some of his classic songs, like this one. So my guest this week is Yusuf Islam, also known, of course, originally and still as Cat Stevens. You know, what a career. Debut single, Matthew and Son, 1966. Brilliant new album now, King of a Land. The best part of 60 years later. And certainly he's one of the people responsible for drawing lots of individuals of several generations, certainly mine, towards folk. When I was growing up, it seemed that nearly everyone had his classic album Tea for the Tillerman or Teaser and the Firecat. It's been a life, a career, not without controversy, of course, but certainly a thinker, an adventurer, a brilliant songwriter, a legend. He must be. Glastonbury say so. The new album is called King of a Land. It's released this Friday on George Harrison's Dark Horse label, and the Glastonbury Legends slot is on the 22nd. He spoke to me recently down the line from Berlin. We started off the show with Peace Train, and there's a direct link to this, the opening track of the record, Train on a Hill.
There's a train on a hill.
That's Train on a Hill by Yusuf Cat Stevens from the album King of a Land. And Yusuf joins us from Berlin. How's Berlin today, Yusuf?
Guten Tag. Yes, guten Tag. Actually, it's nice. It's sunny here. Here.
Yeah.
Lovely.
I love that song, Train on a Hill. I love that kind of, lilting mellow brass. Tell us a little bit about that song.
It's a reality check, because we're talking about the peace train, really. We're talking about the train on the hill. It's got stuck, and there's very few, stations left in this world where it can go to and so therefore it's an important song. But at the same time, the peace train still exists, and so the ideal, in my mind and in many people's minds, is always longing for that time when it arrives.
Yeah. It's taken quite a while to, the best part of a decade to put together this record. I mean, what does that actually mean? I mean, does that mean, like you talked about Train on a Hill, and so you wrote that a while ago in Berlin? Have you just had sort of a bunch of songs gestating, and it just took a while for you to sort of put them in the right order and get your head in the right space to record them all?
Yeah, it's a very complicated process. It's an accidental kind of process where as a songwriter, I've probably got about, 1,000 melodies which have been there since I started writing songs. And some of them became, complete, and I recorded them and it was done. And some of them just still hang around. And so it's part of my resource, within myself. And then when you get on an instrument, sometimes it tells you something, and the magic begins, and you start to write something, but I like to make sure that I'm always saying something. So I have to wait for a good theme. For every song there has to be meaning. That's very important for me.
When you say you've got 1,000 tunes hanging around, what do you mean by that? Do you mean in your head? I mean, the Beatles, and we'll talk a bit about George Harrison later on, but the Beatles always said they couldn't record anything in the early days, but it didn't matter, because if it was a good one, they'd remember it the next day. So do you record these fragments, or do they exist in your head?
Both, but I have lots of little cassettes which I've never bothered to look back at because they sound so crunchy, and you have to wait.
Have you still got a cassette player?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I think I did have one. I tried to buy a new one. It was very difficult. So it's all that kind of complication when you come back to playing old tapes and all that stuff. But there are lots of things which have, been digitalized as well. I've got some old demos which, crummy sound, but they're the original kind of demos that I did in the early days in the 65 and that period.
You've called this album a mosaic. What do you mean by that?
I think if you listen to the album, you'll hear lots of different themes and genres. The things that I've gone through, things that I love about different types of music, and you'll hear a rock song and say, well, hang on, he's not known for writing rock songs. You know what I mean? So
we're going to come to that very shortly.
Yeah. There's quite a heavy one in there, and that came because of a riff. I found this riff, and then it all kind of took off from there.
All Nights, All Days reminded me of the Travelling Wilburys a bit.
Yes. I mean, you don't really go out to do that, to sound like someone, but there are certain songs like that one sounds like the Travelling Wilburys. We've got this slide guitar on that one, and actually, if you listen to Highness, that could also have been a song that George Harrison might have written. It's got that timing. It's very slow. It's legato, and it's got this slide in it, the same kind of slide guitar. So he subliminally definitely influenced me in these songs.
Yeah. Now let's hear Pagan Run, because I think you mentioned the rock song. I mean, when this first came on, it was a shock. It's almost like an AC/DC riff, the first bit of it.
Yeah, it's great. I love it, and I couldn't play it myself. I knew what I wanted to sound like, so I gave it to my other guitarist, Eric Apopole, and he did it perfectly. So
tell us what's going on in Pagan Run. Tell us something about the words.
Well, it's a kind of it explains the psyche, the moment, many moments in my life where, before I knew a little bit more about what life is, you're frightened. You don't know what's going to hit you next, and because of that, you grab anything. It could be superstition, any kind of idea that might possibly save you from disaster, and so that's why I call it Pagan Run. So a lot of people grappling with fate and destiny and don't know what to do when it comes, when it happens, and trying to find out what possibly it's going to do tomorrow. You know what I mean? So it's that kind of, and then at the end there's a resolution, because for me it's a kind of we call it a salvation. It's a kind of I've been lifted up, in my spirit to understand more, and then I find a place of peace, and that kind of happens towards the end.
I was on the Pagan Run.
That's Pagan Run, which is probably the rockiest moment on King of the Land, Yusuf Cat Stevens' new album. Yusuf is with us. I don't often talk about the label things are on, because really, normally, who cares, Yusuf? But this is on Dark Horse Records, George Harrison's label, and you also use the studio at Friar Park. So, I mean, the shadow of George sort of hangs over us here. Did you know him?
No, not really. Not very closely, but I mean, we were in those days, in a way, we were sort of, some of us were bumping into each other a lot, and others were kind of avoiding each other, because we were listening to each other, and that was the thing. And I listened a lot, obviously to the Beatles. I mean, that might, who else are you going to listen to when you're in the 60s, and the Stones, of course. But but when George started going spiritual, that was a big moment for me, because it coincided with my the beginning of my journey into studying myself and studying life. And I was in hospital with TB, and so there was this very important thing that I think George gave to the Beatles, and I love that, and I think that's the thing, seems to be resounding even longer than some of the other songs. Which, if you look at Here Comes the Sun, it's like the number one, Beatles song that people love to go to.
Yeah. What's it like being in Friar Park? Is that, because that's obviously a studio in his house, because his son runs the label, doesn't he? So presumably this all came about because of him.
Yeah, and that was because of my son, my son Joris got in touch with Danny, and, they talked, and soon enough, we were sort of talking about the new record, and they'd heard the songs, and then we got involved. And I like it because Dark Horse represents the old sort of bespoke label where you know who the boss is, at the company. You can see him walking around, and And Friar Park was just, it's magical there. It's got George all over the place.
Has it?
Has
it got his stuff there? Instruments, amplifiers, things still there?
Oh yeah, all these guitars. I went into one room, and every guitar of George's that they kept, which he didn't break or sell or whatever, they were all there in that one room. And I was pretty petrified, to pick it up, but I did, and I started playing a few things, but then I went back to my guitar because I knew what it sounded like.
I mean, is it too much to sort of ask if you sort of felt him watching over you, or is that me being too romantic and imagination about it?
It's a bit spooky, that. No, I didn't feel that. But people don't disappear. You can sort of sense people's presence and things that they've done in their life have impacted you to be the person you are, and that's so that lives on. That's an important thing.
Well, there certainly are parallels, aren't there? Because he looked east, and you both went on a journey from sort of pop star to a much more spiritual life, which, I mean, famously, without going back and raking over old coals, that led you into a sort of freedom of speech sort of row back in the day, which we don't need to go through now. But you talked about a journey and learning yourself. Do you think, in light of some events that have happened since, do you feel the same as you did then, or has it all been kind of continuous growth?
It's to do with it's all to do with growth. It's to do with evolution. We change as we grow older. We look back at those photographs. We say, "Wow, no, pretty handsome guy." That, and now, hang on, I'm looking at myself in the mirror. I say, 75 years old. Hang on, is that me? And so we go through these changes. But the evolution of and learning. But the great and the most important thing is to come to the place where, and I wish more people would get there, it's to do with understanding a bit more about the meaning of life. And you can't do that by just borrowing it from someone else. You've got to do it for yourself. You've got to find out. And I think that's the biggest, a problem that most people face. They haven't got time sometimes. So when if you're ill, or you've had an accident or something like that, and then you're taken out of your little pod, and suddenly you're looking at yourself, and that's a chance for some people to get to know, what it's all about. And anyway, that's the kind of thing that some of us go through, and obviously George, when he was a Beatle, and he couldn't go anywhere because he could not stop being a Beatle, wanted to find a place where he could escape from all that to find himself. I think that's what happened.
Yeah. Well, you're known as Yusuf Cat Stevens, so that sort of that hybrid sort of means you straddle both sides of exactly the kind of experience you're talking about, like Cat Stevens, the pop star, and Yusuf, man of faith. Now, presumably, your faith preaches a certain humility. How does that sit with being officially the Glastonbury legend this year?
Well, you can't hide. If you sit down, don't do anything when all this rubbish is going on. That's bad on you. So I think you've got to be up there talking about it and making things better. Just at least trying. Yeah.
Have you done the set list yet?
For sure. I'm not going to tell you.
No, I'm not going to ask. We're very much. And then this is your first time at Glastonbury. It seems strange you never passed through there back in the day, doesn't it?
Yeah, it kind of looked muddy, the old days, and I thought that looks like what, I like my shoes to be clean, but no. And then it came. I think it was like 2006. He asked me to do it then. I just didn't feel ready, and I think it really is an appropriate time now. Because my catalogue of songs, if you look at it, and going back to like 1966, my first single. I've got quite a catalogue of songs, and I think people are going to have quite a musical journey with me.
Great. Okay. Well, I hope it stays dry, and so your shoes don't get muddy. But
yes.
Tell us about How Good It Feels from the new record, Yusuf.
Oh well, that's one of my favourite songs on the album, and it goes back again to one of those little tunes that I had hanging around from I think 1968. I was very inspired by classical composers. So, Tchaikovsky, I had one of his records. It was like the Swan Lake, and that influenced me. And so I started developing a melody, and I just didn't take it any further. I just had it as a personal favourite of mine. And then, we talk about evolution. Then I come round to wanting to write something and I go back to that melody, and I suddenly find a way forward. And so that song was completed about a couple of years ago. And there's a particular lyric I love in there, because it reminds me of the time when I got lost in Battersea Park fun fair, and I lost sight of my mother, and I was so frightened. And then all of a sudden she comes and finds me and picks me up, and that's mentioned in this song.
Okay, well, we love the album. It's a rich and varied work, and we look forward to seeing you at Glastonbury. Thank you for spending some time with us, Yusuf.
Thank you, Mark. God bless to you and everybody.
This is How Good It Feels.
I know what it's like.
With a little help from Tchaikovsky, How Good It Feels, Cat Stevens from his new album King of a Land, which is out this Friday on the 16th of June, and we look forward to finding out what that set list is at the Legends slot at Glastonbury on Sunday afternoon on the 22nd.